Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some books that I absolutely loved that I picked up because of other booktubers. We kind of know that we influence a lot of you all to pick up books based on our recommendations, but we also influence each other to pick up books based on things that we love. That's definitely been the case for me. And in fact, some of my most favorite books are books that I've picked up because of other booktubers. So I wanted to talk about a few of those in the video today. I've got 5 books that I really loved. Some are all-time favorites for me that I picked up because of other booktubers, and I want to recommend them to you. But today's video is also a collaboration with 2 other wonderful booktubers, so I hope you will go and check out their videos. They're all up at the same time, and their videos will be linked in the video description down below. This is a collab with Temecka from Temecka's Library and Izzy from Happy for Now. So if you're interested in hearing which books they have picked up in their booktube careers because of other booktubers, go and check out those videos, which are linked again in the video description. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the 5 books from 5 different booktubers that I picked up on their recommendation and absolutely loved. We'll begin with the one that is not necessarily a favorite for me, but was a 5-star read and is something that I remember fondly. I read The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay because of Rachel over at the Shades of Orange BookTube channel. Rachel reads a lot of horror and a lot of science fiction, and when I started on BookTube, I was not into horror at all. I didn't really like horror growing up, so I just assumed I still wouldn't, and I hadn't really read horror books. Come to find out, it's now becoming a new favorite genre for me, and Rachel was one of the people who sort of encouraged me to try getting a little outside my comfort zone and try some new things, and this is a book that she really loved and recommended, and I picked it up on her recommendation, and I loved it too. I feel like Paul Tremblay is kind of a polarizing author because his endings are sort of open-ended. They can be interpreted more than one way and aren't necessarily clear, which not everybody likes. Personally, I love it, especially in this genre. It really works for me. The Cabin at the End of the World is a home invasion story. It follows 2 dads and their adopted daughter who go on vacation to this cabin in the woods, and their home is invaded. Things do get pretty dark and violent, but I thought this was so interesting and well executed. And what's interesting about this is you don't necessarily know whether everything that's happening is just because of evil people or is because of something more paranormal, I guess you could say. So yeah, I really love this. I've continued to enjoy things I've read from Paul Tremblay. In fact, Head Full of Ghosts is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, which is also by him. So thank you so much to Rachel for getting me to step out of my comfort zone and discover a genre that I really can enjoy a lot. If you don't already follow her, I will have her linked in the video description along with all of the other booktubers I'm going to mention in this video, and I would recommend following her if you're interested in great horror and sci-fi recommendations. She's got really interesting books and really great reviews. The next book I want to talk about is a current favorite, and actually this works out perfectly for this video concept because I read it in a reading vlog where I was trying books that I bought because of a booktuber. You may have seen this. If not, I will link it up above. I read 3 books that I bought because of Angela at Literature Science Alliance, and one of them is a new favorite of the year for me. I really liked all 3 of the books that I read, but Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang was definitely one of my favorites. I know this is kind of a booktube darling last year, but it was Angela's review that convinced me to finally pick this up and give it a try. I had an idea of what this book was that was very different from what my experience ended up being. I think for some reason I thought it was going to be a lot more like martial arts fighting, which there is a little bit of that, but the character work in this is just incredible. It's got a badass mom in it. It can be hard-hitting and deals with some difficult issues at times, but I loved it. I didn't want to put it down. Everything about this worked for me, and I'm so glad that I decided to pick it up, and it was Angela's review that pushed me to do it. Angela is another booktuber I recommend you check out. She reads pretty widely, mostly sci-fi fantasy, but a little bit of other things as well, and emphasizes diversity in her reading. So if that's something you appreciate from my reviews, I would definitely recommend checking her out. And I just love her reviews. I think she's really thoughtful and insightful and does a good job of trying to explain who would and wouldn't like particular books, because, you know, much like me and my review style, we recognize that not every book is for every person, but Loved Sword of Kaigen. I don't know that I would have picked it up if it hadn't been for Angela's review, and I'm so glad that I did. Next up is the book that was my first outing with an author who is now an auto-buy author for me, somebody who I absolutely love, and I had never read from her before I heard Jocelyn at Yogi with a book talking about it. Jocelyn and I are friends. She used to have a booktube channel. She doesn't really anymore, but she's still pretty active in the book world and works as a publicist. And the book that I read because of her was The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Now, Jocelyn loves Silvia Moreno Garcia and convinced me that I should give her a try too because she kept raving about her, and I was like, okay, let me try this out. If this cover looks unfamiliar, this is the out-of-print original cover. It finally got reprinted after Mexican Gothic became like a New York Times bestseller, so there's a new paperback cover for this, but I really like the original. I love this. This is still one of my 2 favorite books from Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I just generally love her writing, but this was phenomenal. It kind of feels like a mix of Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters with a dash of magic. It's so good. It's like a romance of manners, so it's like courtly manners. There's a little hint of magic in it, not a lot. Like, it's not really a fantasy romance in the way that I imagined it was before it would go in. There's just like a teeny bit of a supernatural speculative element to it, but there is drama, there is angst, there is romance. Like, it is so good, and this is making me want to reread this book, but I absolutely loved it, and this turned me on to someone who is now one of my favorite authors. And again, I had never heard of her before. I don't know that I ever would have picked up anything by her if I hadn't heard Jocelyn raving about her. So thank you to Jocelyn. I am so grateful that Silvia Moreno Garcia is now part of my life. Next is something that I think was one of my favorite books of last year or the year before. Honestly, I can't quite remember because the years since COVID have sort of run together in my brain, but this is a book that I don't know that I would have picked up if it wasn't for the fact that I decided to do a project where I read all of Mara from Books Like Woe's all-time favorite books. Because we shared so many favorites on that list already, I thought I had a pretty high chance of finding some new favorite books by reading her favorites, and I was not wrong. If you're interested in seeing that video project, I'll link it up above. That was really fun. But the one that I wanted to mention today is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This was not really on my radar. I don't often pick up literary fiction, which is what this is. Sometimes I do, but not as frequently, and I didn't really know much about this, but I loved it. I understand that this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but this just hit me in a certain way emotionally, and it was amazing. This is definitely a quiet literary book that is very much about reflecting on one's life. It follows this man who had always worked as a butler, who is nearing retirement age, but also the world he came of age in has drastically changed. His entire life has been about being a butler, and he, in this book, kind of goes on a road trip through the English countryside and reflects on his life and the choices that he made and the love that he kind of let go, and reflects on why he made those choices and how he feels about his life now, and as he's coming into the later years of his life, like what he regrets, what he doesn't. And I just thought it was really beautiful and really emotional, and I loved it. Again, not something that I probably would have picked up on my own, but Mara really loved it. It was on her list of all-time favorite books, and I picked it up for that project, and I'm so glad that I did. Lastly, and of course I had to save this one for last because this is a book that is now in my list of all-time favorite books, like top 10 favorite books I've ever read, and I picked it up because of another booktuber who recommended it, but then also kept like nudging me to read it and was like, Bethany, have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? And I finally did, and I love it. And that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I read this because of Leanna over at Leanna's library, and I am so glad that she pushed and pushed and pushed until I read it, because this is just everything that I love. It's cozy, lyrical fantasy with characters I adore and a world I adore, and yeah, just like everything about this is so good. It's so good. I have reread it. I still absolutely loved it on a reread. And yeah, this is one of my top 10 favorite books of all time. And I read it because of Leanna. And you know what? I have read a lot of books because of Leanna, because she does like to push her favorite books on her friends. And I'm not mad about it because I usually like them, mostly. Occasionally it doesn't work out so well, but mostly I have liked them. The first Law books, Joe Abercrombie, I've read because of her. The Red Rising series, I partly read because of her, but this is definitely the standout of one that I absolutely adored and didn't really have on my radar before I met Leanna and heard her rave about it. So I'm very grateful and I love this. So there you go. 5 books that I loved that I read because of other booktubers. I think it's really cool that we can influence each other to read books that might end up becoming new favorites. You just really never know. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. If you have any thoughts or feelings on the books that I talked about in this video, let me know. And for your question of the day, this is going to be an obvious one, but tell me about a book that you loved that you read because of a booktuber. Have I done this question before? Probably, but still, it's always fun. I always like to see. So what is a book that you really love that you maybe wouldn't have picked up if you hadn't heard somebody else recommending it? Let me know in the comments down below. After this, don't forget to use the links in the video description to check out Izzy and Temecka's videos. I'll be heading over there myself to go and see what books they picked and who inspired them to pick them. Both of them are wonderful, and I hope you go check out their channels. If you all like this video, it does help if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.